I'm going to now show you a few things about editing in GarageBand. So when you first open GarageBand, you will see this window pop up, and you will choose Empty Project, unless you have an existing project. Otherwise, you would say Open Existing Project. We don't have one of those, so we'll just double click on the Empty Project. And so then you will be greeted with the second window, which will give you the type of track that you should use. And so the software instrument is if you had a keyboard or something like that that could use the MIDI language to communicate between an instrument and the computer, you could use that. You could record it using a microphone or line input. So if you plugged in something directly into it, this is you can also drag and drop audio files. This is the one we'll be using today. The other two are if you have other instruments that you want to plug in or use instruments or sounds from GarageBand itself. So we will just use the second one with our microphone. Down here, we can choose our input and output settings. I don't have the usual gear that I would have available, and so these will just stay built-in microphone and built-in output for now. If we wanted to, and if we had the equipment, we can go in and change these. There would be a lot more options here in output device and input device here. Close this, and so everything looks good here, so we will create. And this is the basic interface of GarageBand. A few things we need to change right away. Because this is primarily meant for recording music, it shows things in bars and beats rather than time. And so we can click this little triangle here and choose time. And then we also need to turn off the metronome, which will play through unless you actually turn it off, which can be very annoying and can get on the track and can ruin a recording. So we have some basic controls here, just like we had in Audacity. Rewind, forward, stop, play, record, and then this is for creating loops. We won't really cover that in this, but that's what this is for. We don't need the library, so I'm going to close that window a little bit. Let's start by just recording a quick demonstration here. And so we know our input and outputs are correct, and so we will just hit the record button, and then you should start seeing the waveforms show up in response to your recording. You can see the level that it's at here, and this is unfortunately titled volume and not gain. Whereas we talked about in the workshop, there are differences between gain and volume. Gain is the signal strength of what you're recording, and that will be standard across any device that you would edit or play it on, whereas volume is the perceived loudness and can be adjusted. So Apple's not helping with the confusion between those terms, but just make sure you keep that correct. So if you wanted to adjust the gain of this, you would move this down or up, and then you would see a parallel change in the audio signal strength. So now we're going to talk about editing. And editing in this is a little bit easier than in Audacity for a couple key reasons. So I put a few different pieces in there to demonstrate the different kinds of things we can do. So whereas Audacity was a destructive editor, where you were actually editing the file, and any changes you would say would be saved to that file, and anything, so you couldn't get anything else back that you had deleted. GarageBand and most other audio editors are non-destructive. And so what you're editing here is just a placeholder for that. And so the basics of editing in GarageBand, there are two main ways to do this. The first one is to click on the side where you see this bracket between the two carets, and to simply drag that over. And so maybe we just wanted to have this section from here to here to just after 40. We can just pull that over, and then we have that. There are differences between gain and volume. Gain is the signal strength of what you're recording, and that will be standard across any device that you would edit or play it on. Whereas we can move this around very easily, and crucially, and this is the non-destructive part, all of that stuff is back here. You can always pull this back out and get that information and get that audio back. The other way it'll be using the split command, and that is Command T. And so then that creates two different tracks, or that creates two different regions and two different sections from the point where you use the split command. You can move these around. And even when I overlapped it, I can bring that back here. So let's think of this as multiple tracks. If we wanted to make a new track, we can add another track. And we can drag this right on there. We can also right-click on this area, new audio track, and that will give us our new track that way. So again, we can move all of these things around very easily. We can adjust the level on all of these here. A couple different additional things now that we have multiple tracks. We have these two buttons, which are mute and solo. Mute is will mute that particular track, where solo will mute every other track in there. Now, this doesn't matter if you're only working with a single track, but if you're working with multiple tracks, that can be really handy if you just want to isolate one piece of it. So let's say we wanted to put some music in here. And I've got a music track lined up. You can just drag and drop this onto its own track here. So that's pretty loud. So we're going to turn this level down a little bit. Still pretty loud. Now, sometimes it might be hard to judge the relative volume of a track, but that's when you place it up against a piece of spoken audio, and you'll be able to tell very quickly how hard it might be to hear that vocal audio. There are differences between gain and volume. Gain is the signal strength of what you're recording, and that will be standard across any device that you would edit or play it on. Whereas, so that's still pretty loud, but we want to do that effect where the volume of the level of the music track will dip further when the speaking voice comes in. And the way to do that is to show automation. So go under Mix and choose Show Automation. You can also just hit A to toggle that on and off. And so you'll see a line pop up when you click on the track itself. And this, you can draw these lines on here. These are called, from the video world, these are called keyframes. And so you can use this to literally draw the fade down of your audio track. So still not quite there. We started too loud. And we might want to pull this a little bit tighter. Bring that down a little further. Let's see how that sounds. So now we need to actually move it back a little bit. There are differences between gain and volume. Gain is the signal strength of which. That sounds pretty good. This is how you will do fade in. So if you wanted to fade this track in, all we need to do is draw another dot and let's say we want to go all the way to the end, and we've brought this track back up to a more conventional volume, and we draw a fade out at the end. So the automation and the keyframes and drawing, you can do this as many times as you want through here. So you can draw multiple things up and down, depending on how you need them to, function within a given track. So that is the basics of editing with GarageBand. So you can have either, trim, and you need to turn automation off to start doing editing like this again. So you can either drag like this, or you can use the split command to create these new regions, these new sections from that track. There's lots of other things to learn about in GarageBand, and if you are interested in exploring some of these, we'll send you to a few different resources online that can give you some of those details. You can also just email Shapiro Design Lab at UMich, and we can go over those in a consultation as well. It's a little harder to anticipate what all of those needs or ideas are in a broader video like this. So the last thing I'll show is the exporting and saving option. So if you wanted to save this project and work on it again, you would click on Save, and that will give you a window to actually save this as a project that you can come back and work on again. It's really crucial that you don't mix up versions of this. So you want to make sure you're always editing the latest version of this project. Otherwise, you could lose information and work that you did. So this will save everything in a self-contained GarageBand file, which you can upload to Google Drive. You can share with your collaborators, but just make sure that you're always working on the most recent file. If you think this is the final version and you want someone to be able to listen to it, give you feedback or hand it in, you go under Share and Export Song to Disk. And then this will give you some different options for naming it, putting any kind of tags you would want to, and then file formats. AAC is Apple's version of MP3. MP3 is MP3, which is what I recommend people saving it to, because Apples can often only be played on Apple devices. And then AFF and Waves are the highest quality files you can use. These aren't as important. These are important when you are recording and editing, but so the final version of this that you will hand in will be an MP3. So the final version of this project that you create will be an MP3, which can be listened to by anyone. Okay, that's all for GarageBand. And again, if you have specific questions or things are unclear, please email Shapiro Design Lab at umich.edu, and we can schedule a consultation either with myself or one of our audio interns to go over any details or how this applies to your own project.